What's up guys, Collector Crow here at the Collector's Nest. So something that I have wanted to do for a little while now is a manga reading log to let people know what I've been reading and what my general thoughts are on the manga I've been consuming. Now I at first wanted to do one for just the month of April, but there's been a lot going on really the past few months, so I haven't really had all that much time to actually read manga. So instead, I thought I would just do a manga reading log for the past couple of months. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Alright, so I'll start off with manga that are still ongoing, and then we'll jump into the more completed series after that. So first off, I read volumes 14 and 15 of Dr. Stone, and volume 14 somehow escaped me from when I actually read it to when I started recording this video. So I only have volume 15 to show off here, but Dr. Stone is a manga that's still ongoing with Shonen Jump. If you don't know much about it, where have you been? Humans have been paralyzed for hundreds, thousands-ish of years, and they wake up to basically a society that no longer exists. And it's about this group of people that reawaken and try to rebuild society by using science. The science is educational and fun, and Dr. Stone itself, while it sometimes has a little trouble moving with its plot lines and subplots, making them connect logically, again, if you don't think too hard about it, the characters are really fun, the science is great, it's a good time all around. This volume, 14 and 15, they come to the climax, I would say, of the island arc, which, without going into too many spoilers for anime-only people or people who haven't checked out Dr. Stone yet, the island arc, or whatever it's actually called, is where Senku and his pals are trying to overthrow this dictator-type guy who has technology that Senku, the protagonist, and his pals want to get access to. I don't think it's the strongest arc in the series. Again, there's some logic flaws that I was talking about earlier. The antagonist is pretty weak in this part as far as characterization goes. It's not as strong as our past antagonist, who we actually kind of connected with as a character. But I had fun with these volumes. You get to see pretty much every character have some part of the action. They get a moment to shine, so to speak. So it's been fun in that regard, and I'm excited to see how this arc ends. Next is volume 43 of Haikyuu, the volleyball manga from Shonen Jump that recently ended. Now, Haikyuu is a series I just started on a whim back when it was first publishing in English, and I was probably about volume 5 or so when I started jumping in and got the first few volumes, not really expecting much, but I had heard good things about it, and boy, am I glad that I picked it up. Haikyuu has blown all my expectations out of the water. I'm not someone who really does sports manga very often. The ones I have read, I've loved. But Haikyuu has probably become my second favorite manga. And this volume 43 is the, I think there's 2 volumes after it. Volumes 44 and 45, I think 45 is where it ended. But in 43, we've gone through a time skip, and we see our 2 protagonists, Hinata and Kageyama, finally facing off on a grand stage, along with a bunch of familiar faces. And, guys, I've cried at, the last 3 or 4 volumes of Haikyuu. All of them have made me cry. This one was no exception. Lots of great moments, lots of emotional moments, seeing everyone who grew up with these 2 kids, cheering them on, and seeing how much they've improved and become their own players, their own people. And I am so excited, so sad to see how this series ends in the upcoming volumes. So I had a lot of fun reading this one, and it's bittersweet. Next up, I tried volume 1 of Topu GP, and I actually have the second and third volumes, but I haven't gotten a chance to read them yet. This is by the author of Oh My Goddess, or Oh My Goddess, depending on translation, Kosuke Fujishima. So it's about motorbike racing. This kid named Topu, he doesn't really have an interest in motorbike racing, but a girl he likes does, and sort of convinces him to give it a shot. And we get to see how he's kind of a natural genius at it, and how he really gets a feel for coming into his own as a racer instead of just analyzing from the sidelines what other people are doing. I really want to like this manga just because of the interesting concept, but there's something about it that just hasn't hooked me yet. There's a lot of pictures, not a ton of dialogue, so by the time I finished this first volume, it felt like that was it. And I understand motorbike racing is not really a sport where you can communicate a lot with people, as opposed to volleyball and Haikyuu, where you've got a bunch of teammates to constantly talk with or engage in strategy with. So I'm hoping maybe there's a bit more character building, character drama in the later volumes, because just seeing these motorbike races, especially for someone like me and for, I assume, most manga readers who don't have that knowledge of motorbike racing, this falls a little bit flat as far as getting us invested and interested, because Topu himself isn't really that interesting of a character either. He likes to build Gundam figures. That's about it. But yeah, I'm gonna read the second and third volumes. I generally have a 3-volume rule where I give it until then, as long as I'm not absolutely hating it. And then after that, I might decide to keep picking it up or just drop it for the time being, maybe revisit it later. But yeah, Topu, it's not one that I'd recommend yet. I'm hoping it'll get there, but right now it's not quite my cup of tea. And then I finally read my volume 1 of Murcielago. Sorry about pronunciation, I have no idea how to actually pronounce this. Murcielago is a series about this woman here, Kuroko, who is a convicted felon, mass murderer, I think, who is basically recruited by the government to help take out more heinous criminals, sort of using your enemy to take down your enemy. And Kuroko, because she's demented in a way, she knows how these criminals think, she knows how to get inside their heads and capture them, and she's just really OP with her fighting skills, her abilities with weapons. So, of course, she's very good at her job. The problem with this series, as much as I thought I would like it going into it, is that about half of the book is just the characters wanting to have sex, or actually having sex. And, I like a good bit of fan service and cheesecake as much as the next person, but there just comes a point where enough is enough. And gosh, this series, I just got so tired of it. The action is pretty good, and towards the end of the volume, where you actually start engaging in a more long-running mini-arc, I guess, the side characters are actually a lot of fun. They're all having to work together to get out of this booby-trapped house. Pun not intended. But aside from that, the rest of the volume just really got on my nerves with how much the characters all focus on one thing, sex, and how they're all so twisted in their own way, which just suspension of disbelief can only go so far sometimes. So I don't actually know if I'm even going to pick up the second volume of this. It's just this first volume really rubbed me the wrong way and is not something that I really care to continue. Now the last for the ongoing series is Yona of the Dawn. I read volumes 1 and 2. I was pleasantly surprised by this series. I had no real expectations going in other than the fact that I know a lot of people really love it. But it's a shoujo beat title about this Princess Yona who one day suddenly the royal family comes under attack and she has to flee. And after that she's hunted down because she's the princess. So she has to work to try to both hide herself but also eventually reclaim the kingdom that her family built up. The action in this was really great, even though it was very short. Most of the action took place in a couple of panels only, but the art for them was fantastic. Something you wouldn't even think out of place in a more action-oriented manga. And I've liked all the characters so far too. There's a big supporting cast that I'm hoping we'll get to know more about. And Yona herself is actually a breath of fresh air, with her not having been trained in weapons from an early age, but now that she has to defend herself, I'm assuming that's going to come into play with her learning how to actually engage in combat, either as an offensive person or defensive person, or both. definitely recommend Yona of the Dawn if you haven't tried it. Even if you're more typically a shonen type person, this has enough action that I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, even though it starts out very gooey romancy. And now for the completed series. I finally got around to finishing Barrage, Volume 1 here, and Volume 2 right here. And this is actually by Kohei Horikoshi, the writer for My Hero Academia. And I plan to have a more thorough video on Barrage in the future. But for right now, I'll just say it got canceled really early on, and I can see why. It's about this world that comes under invasion by aliens who, I really don't even know what the political climate is. Have they completely taken over? Are they still having some kind of agreements with some factions of the aliens, but they want to take over eventually? That's why it got canceled, because it has this very rich world, and then it just doesn't really go into the details about it. So it's about this kid named Astro who is from the slums and ends up trading places with the prince because they happen to look alike. And it's a Prince and the Pauper type story, but with more action, obviously. Astro learns that he can control a powerful weapon that was originally supposed to be controlled by the prince, but the prince wasn't worthy of controlling it. And so Astro then takes up the mission of combating the aliens and saving the population of the planet in the prince's place. Barrage as a read itself is fine. Again, it's 2 volumes. It's not a big commitment. It's entertaining enough, and I enjoyed it. It's not something that I think if it kept with the current pattern, it would have done well as a longer series unless it really started to take advantage of its world. But yeah, if you see Barrage, in a bookstore or something and want just a light, quick read, especially something if you're looking for more of Horikoshi Sensei's works, this is a perfectly fine pickup to just read and go through at your leisure. So next up, I read the first 3 volumes of xxxholic. I've had this omnibus for a while, and I found a bunch of the singles recently, and I picked them up. And so I felt like it was a good time to go ahead and finally dive into this omnibus I've had sitting around for probably almost a decade. So xxxholic is about this kid, Watanuki, who can see spirits, and in order to eventually get rid of the spirits around him, or get rid of his ability to see and attract them, he starts working at this shop run by Yuko. She is a witch of sorts who's able to control all sorts of mystical artifacts and do different fortune telling, all kinds of stuff you would expect from a witch. The manga so far has just been these little snippets of individual customers to the store getting wrapped up with a mystical artifact that helps bring to light their own flaws as people, and how Watanuki and Yuko try to help, or sometimes don't try to help, them overcome them. I'm hoping that there becomes more of a long-term narrative with this, because I'd love to get more invested in some kind of goals that Watanuki or Yuko might have. I'm going to keep reading it more at a leisure pace, but it's not something that I'm really grabbed by yet. And so finally, I read a bunch of volumes of Yakitate Japan, a series I spoke about in another video recently. This is a cooking manga centered around baking, and the character of Azuma, who wants to create a bread for Japan that Japan can become known for nationwide. And it's about his goal to discover that bread, make a bunch of different specialties of bread, and just show the world that Japan is capable of holding its own. And in these volumes, they pretty much accomplish that by being on the global stage at the Monaco Cup. And you'll notice I went from Volume 8 to Volume 10, like the Dr. Stone Volume 14. I don't know what happened to my Volume 9. Who knows? But these volumes cover the Monaco Cup, which is the global competition that Azuma and his friends get involved in order to try and save their baking company. Then it also is the start of the Yakitate tournament, which follows the Monaco Cup, which Azuma and crew get involved with, again, in order to save the company in a big bet against the company's stocks and trying to get control of the company's ownership that way. And this is a series that could easily be compared to Shokugeki no Soma. This one came out a long time before Shokugeki. Shokugeki and Yakitate both go off the rails with reactions to the food. Whenever people bite into something, they have a just insane reaction to it that's unbelievable most of the time. And Shokugekis are always like 1 or 2 pages long, usually. And Yakitate, on the other hand, started off that way and then gradually been upping the bar each time. And I think that is to its detriment, because in the Monaco Cup, we start to see these drawn out reactions that take entire chapters. It leaves the whole manga feeling a little bit silly, where you're taking away from something that really was kind of serious at the beginning, even though it had an air of self-awareness to it and good comedic timing, honestly. And it just became this bizarre experience of seeing just how far the author can push a boundary of reactions to tasting bread. I enjoyed the manga through the Monaco Cup, but at the very end of that is where it really started to try my patience. Right now, I'm still enjoying it well enough watching the bread be baked, but I'm preparing for the worst. Still, if you like Shokugeki and you want to just get a similar feel from a cooking manga where there's actually battles and people go head to head with their baking skills in this sense, Yakitate is still a perfectly fine pickup. Just don't expect very deep characters, because pretty much everyone is one note in it. And the one character that I think was a really strongly written character in the beginning, the rival character Kawachi, he just turns into an absolute joke throughout the whole series. So that does it for my reading log for the past couple of months. I'm hoping to have more time to read manga in the upcoming months, but based on what the future's looking like, it's not so certain that's going to happen. Again, thanks for stopping by, and I'll hope to see you next time.